Hey guys, it's your boy Encore. We're here with another episode of the Flexwork podcast. And today we have a really awesome guest. She doesn't know this, but I kind of bait and switched her. One of my VAs messaged her on LinkedIn to have her come down to the studio. But she so kindly agreed. And I am so grateful that she let me reschedule this twice before we got here today. Guys, it's my pleasure to introduce you guys to Nita Sanger. How's it going?
Good.
So idea, innovate, consult.
Yes. Idea Innovate Consulting.
Consulting.
Yes.
Okay. And when did you guys start the entire agency?
So I actually started my consulting company like in 2017. I had been working at Deloitte for about 14 years. When I left them, I always had this aspiration to sort of, do my own thing. And so that's when I started it. And I just focus more on consulting. So I do advisory consulting work. So.
Do you love it?
Yes. But it's not easy to actually do it on your own when you're used to working in bigger companies. But even as I've been doing this, I tend to go in. So even since I've started my company, I was brought into a firm like Wolters Kluwer, where I was the head of global innovation to transform their business. Then I went into another firm called Cherry Beckert, where again, was brought in there. And one of the things that I did was to sort of put the entire growth strategy and transformation strategy would help them get PE funding. So there are times that, when I'm brought in as an expert, I go in there and I might be just working with them as an employee, or a lot of time I just go in as a consultant.
Nita, you're crushing the search engine game right now. All the keywords you're dropping and the company names you're dropping. It's going to help this episode just go all over the place. So, in our pre-conversation, we started diving into what does your agency actually do, right? In terms of consulting and the services and the types of clients that you talk to. Mm-hmm. And it's clear that there is a group of professional services that need help advancing their companies to grow to the next stage. But how would you define what your consulting firm does?
So what my consulting firm does is I specialize a lot in services industries, financial services, professional services, legal services, and I gave you a little bit of my background on doing that. And so what we tend to do is right now, for the last decade, and this is just accelerating, the pace of change for these industries is just accelerating. What we're starting to find is that technology is now starting to disrupt the businesses. So if you start taking a look like professional services, that's audit tax advisory firms, which I focus on. So we started to find was that we've been doing accounting the same way that we have for the last 150 years. In the last 4 to 5 years, we started to see private equity coming in, investing in the business because they've realized there's an opportunity to take these traditional people-driven businesses to make them people plus tech-enabled. So taking the processes that we do and automating that, and then changing the way how we deliver services. So a firm like myself, what I do is I have expertise because I've done this a number of times to go in and say, okay, here's what you look like today. Given where the industry is going, what should your firm of the future look like? And then what do we need to do to get you from here to there? That's what I specialize in. So, and I've done that for financial services, legal services, professional services firms. And then I also tend to work with private equity that's looking to invest in these industries. And as they do that, basically say, how can I help your portfolio companies actually achieve the growth that you would like to get them to achieve? Again, sort of following the same methodology.
So you're like the PE shop whisperer.
Yes.
And you're like, hey, look, this accounting firm could really blow up because they're leaving all this money on the table or all this optimization on the table or things like that.
Right.
So if you're an accounting firm and you feel like AI is scaring you because people are, using AI tools to automate their reconciliations and so on and so forth, what is it that you would tell them? How important is it that they start evolving with the times?
So the interesting part is in the last few years, you're starting to see, because 2024, private equity went into so many different companies and has been investing in them. So everybody's starting to realize we need to change. So if you take a look at how this is happening, audit and tax have been the two traditional businesses that have been there. Both of them, the delivery of those is getting automated. And so what that's doing is that otherwise everybody spend time sort of ticking and tying when you're doing audit and tax. And you start to realize that's not what clients need. Clients want insights to run their business more efficiently. So by itself, those audit and tax are becoming commoditized, the actual work that's being done. And that's where the automation can come in. So what I would tell someone is to say, okay, where's the real value you're bringing? The real value is not the ticking and tying. It's the insights you can provide to your client to how to run their business more efficiently. That's where the real value comes in.
Nita, how do you teach an accountant how to communicate insights?
And so, good point. And that's where you're starting to realize that the impact this is going to have is on people, because we are used to doing things in a certain way. And when anyone says, "Oh, technology is so great," technology is just the enabler. It's the human beings that are so important. And I think a lot of time we overlook that. We just think we get the best technology, it'll work. But if people don't use those technologies, it's nothing. So there's a whole change management that needs to be done, because the human beings think about this, right? If I'm an auditor and I've been doing stuff, I know where my pain points are. I can tell you that and say, can you just automate this? This is too much of a pain to do. I'm sure technology can help. Then I'm also the one who's to go talk to the client and tell them, here's what's happening. And so if you think about it, and the clients, which are also the human beings, have to be the ones to use it. They need to understand what's in it for them. They're telling you their need is, I need more insight. So they're looking for you to provide it to them. So it's the people part that is becoming so important. And that means your skills need to change. The capabilities of the human beings need to change. And then you add on one more layer to this is pricing. So if, as you know, a lot of professional services.
Wait, but are you teaching them the skills? Like, does an accounting firm bring you in?
I've done change management for them. Yes.
Okay.
And then,
So you are the secret sauce to help these accountants.
yes, I would like to think so. And I've been very successfully able to do that in a number of places. But then you start sort of seeing the implications of this. So now if I used to take, and we used to charge, and all of us in professional services charge by time and materials. And it took me like, say, 1,000 hours to do your audit, and I charged accordingly. But now if the automation helps make me do the work in 100 hours, so then do I make less money, or do you move to value-based pricing? So it's like when you think about one thing, you start realizing all the other changes that need to take place. It's going to be people. It's going to be how you price yourself. And then you have to start thinking, well, now that we have these technologies, what are the other things we can provide to our clients? So what products and services we can offer? And the things you could do was you could use AI and analytics to provide insights to them. Or you could use AI to take traditional businesses and make them into data businesses. So that's the kind of thinking that we have to do. And at the end of this, I would say if you have a firm that's got the right leadership, they're golden, because the leader will then be able to sort of look beyond the corner and say, this is what I need to do.
I have so many opinions on everything that you're saying right now.
Okay. Would love to hear them.
I think about these companies that come to me where they're like, hey, I don't have enough sales, right? Because they'll come to me as the marketer to just tell me, like, listen, Ankur, I need 1,000 more leads a month for me to meet the sales quota that would allow my business to keep running and do what it does. But these people are terrible at human skills and communication. I mean, I can tell you, I love my accountant as a human being, but his analysis has never helped me once in business.
Right.
Right. I've scaled businesses to 9 figures plus, and my accountants have never been useful in any of it whatsoever. I can't even imagine how accountants my law firms that I've worked with, at one point I had 12 firms on retainer for one of my startups. Mostly just because you need one for every possible variation of business, right? You need an employee law firm, you need a contract law firm, you need like a litigation law firm, so on and so forth. It was almost always me having to tell them what I want them to do, or me telling them, like, hey, this is how I want you to negotiate this deal. It was so rare that someone would come to me with any ideas. And so, I mean, I think it's obvious that the businesses that have actual empathy and understand nuance of the category that they're serving, I think they're going to excel in the world that we're in today.
Absolutely.
But I am so fearful that if, like, these people don't have someone like you to guide them on how to learn some of those skills, there's just no hope for them whatsoever. I mean, that's like dreary and scary as I describe it. But I didn't even know there were people like you out there in the world that had a service like that. It makes so much sense when you explain.
So there's a few of us who do this, and they aren't that many. But the thing that you just pointed out was clients are actually telling you what they need. You have to listen. You told your law firms what you needed from them. Clients are also telling audit tax advisory firms that what you're doing is not adding value. Here's what I need from you. So that's one of the key drivers. You have to know your client well. You have to know their needs, some which they're articulating, but some it's almost like you have to look, it's like you almost have to be a doctor and saying they're telling you this is hurting. You have to look beyond, like beneath that and go like, what's the symptom? What's actually causing that? And what can I do to, as a firm, alleviate that? That's where the real value comes in. And if I give you an example, if you think, like you asked me, like what kind of firms? The big firms have got so much technical debt. They've got technology that's been around for so long. They need help transforming the technology. But if you're a mid-sized firm and you're a smaller firm, you're basically now like being inundated. You've got technology, you've got all these security, privacy. So where now, when my audit tax advisory firm, whom I trust is like my trusted and valued advisor, comes and says, look, you focus on revenue generation, everything else that's non-essential to revenue generation, managing your back office, closing your month-end books. We'll provide that to you as a managed service. So it'll be cheaper for you to do it with us than you do it like you can do it yourself. So you have to start thinking what needs of theirs you're able to meet to help your client be more effective. As soon as you shift that lens from saying, I deliver audit, I deliver tax, to saying, how do I serve my client more efficiently? That's when the value you bring changes.
You must have some stories of really stubborn leadership in companies. They just fight you. They're like, I don't need to change. The clients should change, not me as a service provider.
Or then they try to sort of discount you and say, well, you've not done this before. Like when I went to transforming Deloitte's audit business, they were like, you're not an auditor. Yeah. And I remember asking the CEO, like, why are you bringing me in? I'm a consultant. He's like, because you will have the ability to ask the questions that we don't, because you're not used to doing this in a certain way. And I've realized when you do transformation, and I'm sure you've seen that too, sometimes you need that outsider's view to be able to question, like, do we really need to do it this way? Isn't there a better way to do it? Because we're not tied to how it was being done. And I think that's the value that sometimes you bring in as an outsider. And where I've been more successful has been when you go with that clear lens and going like, here's how it could be done.
Yeah. So have you ever had to call in extra help?
Of course.
How do you go about that process? I mean, it's clear that you have the expertise to give these people the wake-up call that they need, and then you have the expertise to give them a roadmap for how to get there. But what types of agencies do you partner with? And I mean, who do you work with when you come across a difficult situation?
So it depends, right? So I work with a lot of technology providers. So there's going to be, because I'm not the technology expert, but I can help you figure out. So if you're trying to do contract review, here are some of the best contract review tools in the market. Or you need somebody to build a platform. I know firms that do that. Or if you need change management, I know groups that are actually going to provide that. So that's where what I tend to do is, so I have like a network that I would then reach out to and say, I'm working with this client and I wanted to bring you in because I know you understand this industry and I've done this for other clients, and then actually bring them in to sort of say, here's a firm that can actually do this for you. And I know there's enough tools in the market, so then I know a lot of the providers, and it would be like, here's a potential tool that could be a good fit. So I tend to do a lot of that. And I know that you do a lot of marketing. And one of the things that we haven't yet actually tapped in the industry is the go-to-market needs to be different, where firms like yours, which use AI, will become so valuable. Because if you start thinking that it's the partners who are used to just doing the work, that's not the value anymore. It's that client relationship, to become that valued advisor where you can understand their needs and say, hey, you're doing these 3 things. We have 2 or 3 things more that could actually add value to you. But it's getting to that. That's where a firm like yours brings value. And then in some ways, you're making it easier for the partner to have that nuanced conversation with their client.
No, for sure. I feel like we're in a cyclical pattern, right? Because I feel like back in the day, kings would have advisors that actually gave them this type of, response, right? The actual analysis, the actual suggestions, the recommendations. We somehow fell into this world where like you had to be a worker bee, right? This white collar, this blue collar world for so long. Right. And I feel like now it's people who are actually using their life experience, right? And reading books to actually see what they used to do, to have actual things to draw allusions to, right? That are excelling across any category or any industry that you could be in. In marketing, I'm constantly showing people that like you have to approach this with an emotional connection. And if you don't make an emotional connection, no one's going to open their wallet.
Yeah.
Period. Right? No matter what it is, whether you're selling airline tickets or whether you're selling a cup of coffee. And man, it to me, I'm refreshed that I have an opportunity to be a marketer again.
Yes.
I hadn't had that for so long because anyone could start Facebook ads and claim that they're a marketing agency and do what they do. But the nuance of the ad and the syntax and the diction of the messaging and the offer, it actually matters now.
Yes. And so what you hit the nail on the head was that, there was always the talk about like, the older people, we get rid of them. We bring the younger, cheaper people.
Yeah.
What the junior people do is more likely to get automated. It's now the people with experience who can connect asynchronous information, because that's what AI is not doing at this time, at least. We don't know in the future if it would. But then you're able to bring your experience and, like you said, connect with humans at a human level. So today, if I was to do what I'm doing, I'm able to go to my client and sort of say, your industry, this is what's happening. Here's what's happening with your business. Here are some of the other best practices we've seen, and bring that together. That's a skill that you need to have done a lot of this before you can get there. So now what's going to be valued is people who have that ability, who are just not like worker bees and just very like deep knowledge, but like in one specific area, but who can bring that broader expertise. So I think we're in such a fascinating time. People like you and me who've done this and have done it across a number of places, those skills, because I can say, hey, in legal, this is what's happening, or this is what's happening in banking. Here's what you get best practices. And I'm sure you can do the same. We'd have so many stories to share on those. And
I mean, I don't think the podcast is long enough for me to tell all the stories.
Yes.
But it's so interesting that you word it that way. This whole idea of being a mile deep versus being a mile wide.
Yeah.
And that is what has changed. That's absolutely correct. And I don't think you need to be a mile wide necessarily, but to be like a quarter mile wide and have some depth to what your capabilities are, it goes so much further in the market now. I'm going to start using that in my sales pitches.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what's changing in the world. But I think we're in such an interesting time. So, when they would say, may you live in interesting times, we are living in such interesting times.
100%.
And change is the only constant. I mean, literally, and the pace of change is accelerating. So I would say the one skill all of us need to learn is to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And as soon as we get there, then we're going to be like excited by the change, not frightened by it.
So let's talk about the idea of like a specific type of business that you consult for and the version of it that we see in 3 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Are we talking to anyone for like what we should be expecting 10 years from now?
5 is usually the horizon because technology is changing so fast. So I usually say, what's the form of the future 5 years from now?
I mean, in my world, I have to talk months because the level of pace that Gemini and Claude and all these things are approaching with their ability to animate photos and their ability to almost even do mini movies now with just prompting.
Right.
It is wild how quickly things are moving.
Yes.
But I mean, the marketing agency of tomorrow, it's going to be really great brand strategists that are able to create emotional connection and use AI tools to expedite to market. Because things are going to need to launch faster and faster and faster in my world, at least. What does it look like for an accounting firm or a law firm? Or, I mean, we've talked a lot about those two buckets. I'm sure there's other buckets that you specialize in.
Right. But it's mainly those two are like, I would say, financial services.
Okay.
So I think what it's going to come down to is you're going to have to synthesize what's the real value you're bringing to your clients. Because let's say legal, and you mentioned you had a whole bunch of firms on retainer. So the real value is the legal advice that a law firm provides to their client. All the other stuff that all like doing the contracts, et cetera, that's not where the real value is. And so what firms are going to have to do is basically sort of say, what is the real value we bring to our clients? And everything else you can automate because that's not the real value added. So if you start taking a look at where we think this is going to go, we will have all the services. We'll have audit, tax, and audit tax advisor, and then talk about legal, which means the actual work of doing the audit is going to be automated. The real value is going to be the people who can then provide the insights. Gen AI might provide the first level. Then you'll need those senior leaders who would then be able to say, okay, so now let's make that more nuanced for my specific client and be able to have that conversation with them. That's what's going to have on those two practices, like audit and tax. That means the delivery gets automated, but then it's the people who provide the insights. On the advisory side, which is much broader, there's so many different offerings. You're going to have to see what are the services you want to offer. There's definitely going to be security, privacy, risk, et cetera. Or like if you're serving big clients, it's going to be how do you help them transform their businesses. If it's PE firms that whose needs you're meeting, then it's going to be you do QFE, due diligence, a lot of which are going to get automated, or then you do post-merger integration, but then you have their businesses scale. So it literally is not going to be who's your client, what needs of theirs you're meeting. And if it's smaller firms, you'll offer managed services. So I think that's what the firm of tomorrow is going to look like. And whereas we had the big four having 60% of the market, that's going to change. Because now the smaller firms can scale much faster, can sort of transform themselves and become the businesses of tomorrow much quicker because they don't have those big complex businesses. So here's the chance for anyone at after the big four who has the right leadership to actually sort of become like the firm of tomorrow and leapfrog ahead of competitors. The same thing that's starting to happen that would happen to this industry is happening in legal. So private equities realize that if we were able to do this once for this industry, they're now looking at legal. There's a lot of similarities, partnership structure. There's got multiple smaller firms. So now they're starting to say, what can we do there to change that business? There were some restrictions which they already figured out, like if in the audit you have to move it into a separate entity. There the law firms can move into a separate, the actual lawyers will sit in a separate entity and the rest of it can be put, and that's where the growth engine is going to be. So I think all services businesses are going to actually get distilled into the real value you bring, and everything else, as far as possible, automated, give it to a third party, do whatever you need to, but focus on the real value, because legal advice is not going away. Insights to help run your business more efficiently are not going away. And I think that's how we need to think about this.
Okay, so the stuff that's going to remain is the insights.
Yes.
And the human connection.
Yes.
Let's go back to my first question. How do you teach that to someone?
That's a very good question. And that's a very hard one, which I think is going to be the next sort of shoe to drop, because a lot of the people there in both the industries I've told you aren't very good at that piece of it. Mm-hmm. And so the ones who are going to succeed in this are going to be the ones who actually are able to do this. So we're going to see a lot of churn, because the ones who are just the doers are not the ones who add value. It's the ones who can form that connection. And I think that's the thing that we tend to miss, and you see that in the next generation too, is that ability to connect with human beings. That's going to be so valuable. Anyone who can do that will be the one who's going to be winning in this environment.
How long do you think it takes one of these clients of yours to transform?
So the early part of putting the strategy and stuff together is actually the shorter part. That you can do in like 2 to 3 months. But the actual transformation, depending on where you are, is 18 to 24 months, in some cases 36 months. And it's not a one and done, because by the time you get to that, the 24, the 36 months, a lot of new technology that's come out. So I think you have to constantly be going. It's almost like a circular. You get there, then you'll be like, okay, what else can I be doing better? And I think that's the thing that we are. It's never going to be like, we're going to be comfortable and be like, okay, we did this, now we're good for the next X number of years. That's not happening. And I'm sure you see that in your business too. Today you'll have figured this out, and then tomorrow there'll be something else and you'll be like, okay.
Yeah, I try to tell a lot of my clients, sometimes they'll come to me like, oh, we need a new logo. We need to be more fresh. And I'm just trying to tell them their offer is what's wrong. People don't want the thing that they're trying to sell.
Right.
And can that offer, once it's good, remain for a period of time? I think it sure can, right? There are people that want to buy a chicken sandwich, and Chick-fil-A does not need to change their offer.
Right.
They have service ahead of everything else, unless it's a Sunday, and that's a different story. But how long will they be able to ride out that offer, no matter what business vertical that you're in? Really just depends on what's going on in society and the world and everything with it. I think we're going to need accounting for as long as the IRS is around. Those interesting people that are over there. But who knows? We'll see what happens with politics.
Yeah.
And
PCAOB, which is like the audit. Yeah, we don't know whether that's going to remain or not. So you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. But I think most of the services that you're talking about, it's just one of those things where once your offer is rock solid and there's a human connection to what problem you're solving, then I mean, sky's the limit.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, let's say you're a law firm that specializes in motor vehicle type stuff, right? And it's like, hey, your life isn't over. We can come protect you and we can fight this fight and we'll get you the best possible outcome. That would be a good marketing pitch for a motor vehicle based law firm, right?
And so you have to, like I said, it comes down to what's the value you're offering. So if I was to say an accounting firm, they're in the trust business because it's kind of like I provide you financial assurance. I can provide you tech assurance on different parts of your business and help you get there. So
I like the crooked accountants, the ones that are in the find the loophole business.
Okay. But you have to start thinking, and in the legal one, they are in like providing legal advice to help you either get out of something that you've done or to help you achieve something that you want to. The same way like insurance. We know insurance is changing, right? They would charge you like certain amounts. Now with technology coming in, the whole insurance industry is in a different place. So today you can actually have your phones tracking your health. And then if you're able to say, okay, now based on how healthy you are, or how many, like they should be able to say, how much should I charge for insurance? If you're healthy, we're both the same age and you've got like a whole bunch of health issues, then your insurance will be higher than mine. And they can track that. And I think that's where we're getting down to. And financial services. So remember at one point in time, there used to be like a few of the big banks, your JP Morgan and Citi, et cetera, that we all talked about. But remember when the PPP loans came about? It was not the big ones that were giving it. It was a lot of the smaller people that were doing it. So now you're going to different places to get your financials, right? And then we also like when you're actually paying, like you have Stripe, you have so many different things, you start to realize that the banking is changing too. And if the banks don't evolve, they're going to lose clients. So when you go to a Starbucks, do you really care how your Starbucks is getting paid for? Because now you go to a Starbucks. In China, they've started when they have groceries. You go to grocery shopping, they'll do facial recognition. You go pick up stuff, which are all tagged, and literally you can walk out. Which means if banks don't evolve to start owning the customer relationship, they become dumb pipes. You buy the Starbucks or you buy the grocery, you don't care how it's getting paid for. So banking needs to think about their business in a different way. So when you start to see that, and like I think the next generation, even when my kid has to deposit his paycheck for the work that he did, he'll just take a picture. He'll say, I don't think he stepped inside a branch. That means the model has to look very different. And I just released an article like yesterday, which basically says like the retail bank of the future is not going to be that physical space. It's going to be everything outside. If they become the trusted financial advisors for everything that you're going to need, and that might include things like, insurance or like retirement, etc. Once you own the customer, then you can provide more things that they're going to need. So it's every industry you're in, you have to start thinking about what's the value I'm bringing to my client.
So, I mean, let's turn this around. I've been asking you a lot of questions. Right. What questions do you have for me?
So would love to hear, because obviously you've done a number of different businesses. How have you been thinking about it? So I'm just telling you where I'm seeing how the businesses are evolving. Would love to hear, like, you're doing the podcast, but you also do a lot of marketing. Talk to me and tell me how you're seeing that changing, because there's so much technology that's driving that.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the space that I'm in is I still create art. And the part of art that people connect with is some type of emotional connection. Everyone comes to you is like, is AI going to replace marketing agencies now that there's tools with like Canva and ChatGPT talking directly to each other to do all the things that they do? Sure. The lowest denominator of marketing is now automated. And the reality is you can get a lot of those things just from, high school graduate figuring out how to use some of these things, or even there's like 12-year-olds I know that are making tons of money doing that kind of stuff. The stuff that creates brand equity, loyalty, consumer connection long-term, that requires an actual marketer.
Yes.
And there's marketers that don't use the tools like the AI and everything else. And there's marketers that do use the tools. For me, my price hasn't changed throughout what I do. It's just I'm now able to go to market faster than I used to back in the day. sometimes like building a whole website would take a month, right? And now I can do it in a week, depending on the resources that I have and the client budget and so on and so forth. But the beauty of being able to go to market within a week compared to a month is that as trends are changing, which now trends change significantly faster than they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, so on and so forth, clients of mine are able to jump on that trend significantly faster. Now, I think my accountant had a genius idea, and he started doing a hybrid workforce, and he had people that were international that were getting CPA licenses and were able to serve people for a fraction of the cost of other firms. He launched this thing called Mint Clerk, where every one of his services was only $100 a month. Right? Whether it was just the bookkeeping, it was $100 a month. If it was tax prep, it was $100 a month, or whatever it needed to be. And I mean, it flourished to an extent, but the idea was a little ahead of its time for people to get used to something like that. Because small businesses didn't have the freedom to even think about proper bookkeeping or any of these types of things. And so I think it was one of those scenarios where me as a marketer, I might have even failed them at this point, because I knew the problem that had to be solved, but I don't think their clientele knew that they had this problem yet.
Right.
And so I think maybe in like the next 6 months to 12 months, that'll get solved on its own, where the consumer base or the clients are getting smarter now to the changes and opportunities that are there. Because at the end of the day, AI doing reconciliations, it's only like 80% of it correct.
Yes.
Right. And anytime that a bank changes how the stuff shows up on your transactions, everything gets all haywire. Right. So, like let's say you're buying Starbucks gift cards, and, that's a perk and you're filing it a certain way versus your regular Starbucks coffee order that, can't be filed a certain way and so on and so forth. The bank looks at it the same in the transaction line. So there has to be someone that is actually combing through the line items and figuring all that kind of stuff out. That's a wildly arbitrary example that I'm bringing up, but I had this problem in 24's taxes when I was going through line items, so on and so forth. So for me, I just think it comes down to whether or not leadership teams are taking the time to figure out what their clients actually care about. So we align on that 100%, which is awesome.
So the other thing that I keep on thinking about is we know change is hard. Human beings don't like to change. And sometimes what makes me nervous is to think how much of this can human beings take? Because there's such a deep need to be okay, just this, I want to hold on to something. And what are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's going to decide almost like the people who are able to succeed from the ones who don't.
Okay, so I think that's one of those things where I almost force people to change in conversations that I'm with them. So I'm like a terrible person for this question, because a lot of my clients that are stubborn and are going to say, hey, this isn't something that we want. I'll show them case study after case study of why what they're saying is incorrect. And at that point, if they choose not to believe me, I just kind of walk away, right? Because they're not going to believe me for whatever reason. And it might have been my choice of wording, or it might have been my skin color, or it could have been my pedigree. I don't know what the reason is that they didn't want to move forward. But for the people that are super hesitant on change and risk averse and everything that goes with that, I don't know how to shake them up any further than the reality of the situation that they're in, is that they're not set up for success without evolving and getting help, right? If a bakery opens and they do no marketing and they do no innovation and they don't mess around with the sugars that they use so that they could appease the vegans, or that they could appease someone with a gluten-free allergy, or any one of those types of things, they're not going to succeed in any market.
So I think the one thing I realized was when I was trying to change the auditors, and they'd be like, you don't understand. What you started to get to was that when people are saying they don't want to change, you almost have to understand what's the underlying fear. And I say that it usually is that they were afraid they lose their job. So then you have to bring them along on the change journey, as I call it. Because if the one or two people you never do are the ones who are going to put so many roadblocks in your way. And as you bring them along, help them be part of the solution. Once you start doing that, then they kind of buy into it because they can see here's what's the value this is going to bring. It's like, what's in it for me? If you're able to tell them that, look, this will actually, if you do this, and in my world, it's going to be like, you're going to stop doing the mundane tasks, which are boring, etc. You'll do the more value added tasks. It's like your job's not going away. Everywhere you'll be enabled. Even like your marketers are not going away. They'll be able to do what they're doing faster and bring more value to their clients. But that's what I've realized, because when people are afraid of change, fundamentally there's something they're afraid of. If you can get to that and say, bring them along, because if you don't, they're going to be they're going to be the ones who'll actually make sure that the thing fails.
You have way more patience than I do. I struggle when I come across those people, mostly because when I find out the underlying reason for change, it comes back to the same, the fear of not succeeding, right? Or the fear of losing the comfort that they have. And then I'm just like, well, you're on a downward spike right now. Right. So like how much further down do you need to go before you're going to actually have change happen? But kudos to you to be able to take them along on that journey and do what they need to do. Maybe I need to change in how I go about it, but for me, it's just like a stark brick wall for them at that point. And I'm like, listen, buddy, like you're going to fail, right? And this is not going to keep going. And your fear is going to compound if you don't make a change.
And your fear will then turn into reality that you won't succeed. But then that's where I think now, leadership is going to become so much more important, and leadership that has that innovative mindset, who recognizes that what worked yesterday is not what's going to work tomorrow. And I remember, and this I say this, and you'll see that even in my book that I've written, I was like, the CEO was like, he was like, when I was like, okay, we'll do this, we'll automate this piece, or we'll do this. He's like, no, think bolder, think how we disrupt our own business before somebody else does it to us. And I was like, whoa. And then he was like, I'll give you the air cover to go do that. That's what you need. You need leaders who are not afraid to almost do this to themselves, to say, I'd rather do this to myself rather than have somebody else come and do this to me. And, we created a startup to disrupt our whole business, but that's the kind of leadership that you need. And that's what's going to make the difference between success and failure, because then it starts from the top. They'll set the tone at the top, and then they'll bring everybody else along. I think that becomes so important. Would love to hear what you think about that.
Adoption with a team is so critical. There's so many problems that get thrown across leadership of like, how do you get buy-in from everyone underneath you? I mean, forget convincing the leader that change needs to happen. What about the people who are only doers on the team, that we're automating these tasks? You have to figure out a way to. See, I don't want to give the wrong advice, right? Because there's some people that will genuinely lose their job if they don't get new skills, right?
Right.
But you should, out of loyalty, pay for them to go get new skills,
right,
while you're automating, their task or what they're doing. And if those people are unwilling to learn new skills, and they walked away from the job at that point. Then there's scenarios where you have to walk an employee through the idea that, like, look, I'm doing it to myself, like you said. They're disrupting their workflow and everything that they have. But the employee has to understand what's on the other side of the fence, because sometimes leadership won't show them the macro vision of like, this is what the change is going to look like as we build the version of this tomorrow. I've had so many scenarios where CEOs will like come in and be like, this is our new mission statement.
Right.
They don't explain why they changed their mission statement. They don't explain what like the long-term vision is for where this needs to be. For example, when they talk about carbon footprint, so many companies did such a terrible job about this, right?
Yeah.
Like the car manufacturing industry, they're just like, by 2030, everything will be electric. Or by 2030, we're going to have, full green, zero carbon footprint, so on and so forth. But then there's employees that are like in the oil. Like, what are you talking about? What does that mean for us? How does that change anything? And then nothing actually changes in the short term. What I've seen fail miserably is when employees are expecting gradual change to get to the finish line,
right,
but there's stagnant periods where there's no updates and no communication. And there's so many multitudes of reasons for that to happen. It could be a cash flow problem. It could be seasonality that's happening in the business, and so on and so forth. I don't have the answer for how to do better in the comms. I'm struggling myself on that, right? Building an agency, doing the things that I need to do. I mean, is my graphic designer scared that his job is going to go away? No, he knows that he's such a skilled, talented artist that his ability to convey emotion is not going anywhere.
Right.
Right. But I had editors that were very worried for podcast editing, for example, like, hey, there's all these AI tools that'll do podcast editing, and there's websites like Opus that'll just like clip up the clip so that you could use it on social media. Is my job going to go away? And the reality is that, hey, look, I'm going to pay for these tools for you so that instead of doing one edit in the week, you can now do 5 edits in a week. It's not like you're working any harder than you were working before.
Right.
It's just your work is now more relevant to the types of clients that we have. And then the thing that is always the hardest, in my opinion, is sometimes an employee is never going to be a value add employee.
Right.
Right. So then you just as a leader have to decide, do you want to be loyal to this person or do you need to make a change that's better for the business? That's my perspective.
No, I totally agree. And one of the biggest things is that what leadership forgets it. They just think we've got this figured out, so we know where we're going. You have to communicate it to people. As long as you tell them what you're doing, that's what people want to know. What am I going to expect? What's going to happen this quarter? What's going to happen next quarter? What's going to happen in the year? And once you do that, then they feel part of something. And when we talk about innovation and transformation, there's this thing that innovation doesn't happen at the center. It happens at the edges, which means that the people who are closest to the clients are the ones who will see where the pain is for the client and for themselves, and they bring that to the table. So it's creating that ability and that culture to be able to say, here's an issue that I've seen happening again and again. Why don't we do something different about that? So then you involve them in the solution. The more you do that, the more they're like, okay, I'm part of this. Because very often leadership, because as they move to the top of the food chain, they are kind of not doing the same kind of client interaction on a day-to-day basis. They're not doing the work, so they don't know where the pain is. And I think that's what I've found when it comes to it. You have to know that anybody who's doing that, even when I do transformation, I see myself more as an orchestrator.
Yeah.
This is not about me trying to be how great I am. It's me trying to make my client successful. What's it going to take? So you need them to buy into this.
What about when the pain is the leadership?
Well, that's a whole different thing. That's something that's hard for anybody from the outside to solve. But if they,
I swear, my whole team that's listening right now just started cracking up. They're like, hit the nail on the head with that one.
Because the leader, the chances of they bring you in, the leader already knows they need to make a change. Otherwise, they won't bring you in.
Yeah, fair enough.
And it might be that a lot of, and look at all the industries we've talked about, which are, they flourished on the fact, legal flourishes on the fact that this is case law, this is what was done in the past. Accounting, auditing is like, this is what we did last year, this is what we're going to do this year. So inherently, those are low-risk industries. They're not used to doing stuff in a very different way. So I think when you think about it from that perspective, it's not surprising that they don't want to change that easily. So...
Another thing that I've learned, and I'm sure you use this all the time, the macro level knowledge that you probably possess from your work experience is also compounded by your network and you having some insider information on things that are going to change, right? Like in my world of marketing, I knew when the FTC was going to drop that you now have to have hashtag ad in an Instagram post when you're posting about something or paying an influencer to do something. So I knew how long brands could get away with it. Right. Before they had to start doing the things that they were doing. But then there's the question of authenticity and messaging and what does your customer really care about? Do they care that they have the ad there or do they care that the person actually uses the product? And I'm more curious to understand, in the finance world, there are so many changes to like the loopholes in tax accounting, right? And there's so many changes in law, right? With all the scandals, right? The Nigerian prince that left me his whole inheritance or, the PayPal invoice that I have left unpaid from some random vendor I've never heard of that ends with like Chinese characters and so on and so forth. I was a victim of a mortgage fraud where when I was going to buy a house and my attorney for my real estate contract, their email was hacked.
Okay.
And so I was getting emails from some random person. And, after I want to say 3 weeks of emails, assuming I was talking to my attorney, was like, hey, here's the wiring information, send it over so that we can get the escrow set up for the house, so on and so forth. And these are very detailed email comms. I call my attorney because there's some delay, and they're like, we haven't heard from you in 3 weeks. I'm like, what are you talking about? I have email after email from you. There's just so many things that both of those industries have to be on top of.
Yes.
That
which is why they train their employees all the time. So when there's a phishing email, and it still happens, like, so yes, and legal unfortunately is not very good at this, but you have to be incredibly careful. That's why I meant that now the needs of the business has gone beyond just providing legal advice. They got to make sure they keep their clients' information, secure.
Agreed. Eric is our engineer today. I'm never going to send you an email telling you to wire me money. It's just not going to happen. Don't do it. Okay.
So, and I think that's the thing. So you have to then train your people. Literally, we would actually go through training where this would be like identify that whether this is a real or a fake email. Because you'll have, there's enough giveaway signs. So now anything that looks suspicious, like which will have like wrong spellings or something, and I'm like, phishing email. Or like there are times when it's come from the company and I will sort of say, is this something that we've actually sent out? And sometimes it might be that it was actually a real email. But I think that's what you have to become so much more vigilant, because some of the horror stories you hear about, it's like unbelievable.
You know what it is? We were talking about it earlier. It's not supposed to be easy, right? To survive in business. And it's not supposed to... No one's job is going to be out here to like make it easier for you to carve your path. You just have to figure it out and have resolve. And if you truly love what you do, you just enjoy it. And it's simple as that. I don't think I'm a masochist by any means. I enjoy what I do. It's why I do it every day. But God, I wish it was easier. I so wish it was easier sometimes, but it's just not.
But I think that's what you have to find it interesting and exciting. But like you said, you have to have that network, because like I always say, there's the best ideas don't just come by me sitting in a room. It's like talking to people. And then I might say something to you, and then you say something that sparks. I'm like, oh yeah, like this is the next thing. So that's why I do see the value like of people working together, like in teams. But like the teams are now no longer going to be where it's, in a lot of our industries was very top down, where you had the pyramid structure. There's one guy at the top and everybody else. Now it's becoming more of like a holacracy. You bring certain skills to the table. I bring certain skills. You bring certain skills, and we come together, and then together that team is so much more powerful because we're all sort of playing to our capabilities. There might be one leader, but it's not going to be like, it's not command and control anymore.
Yeah. Eric, what skills can I count on you for? Video and lighting? Perfect.
And I think that's the value that we bring. And it's also having the ability to have humility. So I'll just explain to you how I got there. So when I was like trying to transform Deloitte's audit business, I was actually... I
love that flex, by the way. You just like drop that so casually. But go ahead, continue.
So then what I was doing was I had moved to our town, and my kids were like new in town, and they were doing the town sports. So I was like, they needed a manager. I'm like, yeah, consultant, I can do this. And I became the manager of the soccer team. And people were like, have you played soccer? I'm like, of course I have. And I said, I'm a consultant. We consult on stuff we know nothing about. And so what I started to do was I would read up on the stuff. I would, I had to play even the positions. I had to do all of that. And then I started working like as a team. Like these are my assistant coaches were going to be like we were a team. I would ask the kids what they wanted to learn. And you started doing that. So it taught me humility. To be able to tell people who are younger than me and go like, hey, what is it that you would like to do? Then even the parents, and somebody explained to me, you guys are good at we lost the first few games. You're good at offense. So you score goals, but you're bad at defense. So I'm like, this is teaching me something. And so then I started taking those skills. And as I was going into the transformation, people were talking about AI and blockchain, and you were like, shit, I don't understand that. But the fact that I was doing something here that was like, I was so much in the space of like, I don't know what I'm doing, being comfortable, being uncomfortable actually helped me here, because then I was okay to tell, okay, you're the blockchain expert. And I explained this to me, how this works. So in some ways, we almost realize that if we're able to do this in one aspect of our life, you will find that it benefits you on the other side too in work. So that's where I'm starting to see more and more. And you almost have to have the humility to say, you probably know less lighting than he does. So he brings that.
Not true, Eric. Don't get gassed up.
But then you have to start saying, that's his expertise and this is my expertise. And together we can do much better. And the one thing I didn't tell you is that when I was the first time I did the soccer thing, We actually won the championship.
No way.
Yes. And I was like, when it happened, I was like, oh my God. And I was the first woman coach because a lot of the time, all the dads used to be doing coaching.
Yeah.
And my thing was like, I don't want my kids to get like, yeah, I'll just do it. And literally when we won it, I was like, oh my God, how did we do this?
You missed out on your calling in life. You should have been a professional soccer coach.
And then the other, like a lot of the other girls, because I was doing the girls team at this time, and the other girls were telling their moms, like, why can you not do it if she can do that? So I was like, okay, that's at least good to know. Set a good role model.
You're like a real life Ted Lasso. That's awesome. So how was it being in our podcast studio today?
I think it was great. I mean, I liked how you sort of set this whole thing up.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't fall into the trap with the messages from the virtual assistants and people that reached out to you. But, you know, the idea of like, hey, this is a scam, I'm not going to respond. You actually responded. And
because I kind of looked up the person who sent it to me and I was like, why not give it a shot in this day and age? It's like, there might be something that you bring to the table that I don't.
I bring a lot to the table.
Well, there you go. So that's kind of why I agreed to it.
That's awesome. No, it was such a pleasure having you here. For the audience at home, I'm sure there's a lot of them that have their own businesses that could use your help and your guidance and your soft touch with pushing them across the finish line. How do they find you on the internet?
So I have my website, which is www.ideainnovate.com, or you can look me up on LinkedIn, Nita Sanger, and you will find me there. Because I do help a lot of businesses that like get PE funding, et cetera, and then need to move from like startup to scale up. That's also my area of specialty, to help them figure out what they need to do, what are the things they need to put in place to help them get to the next level.
So guys, please go look up Nita on LinkedIn. I'll obviously have the links and everything in the caption below. And Nita, thank you so much for being here. This has been another great episode of the Flexwork Podcast.
Thank you for having me.